Welcome to Tea with Sophie. This is a weekly space for wise, thoughtful women over 50 who want to age powerfully in mind, body, and spirit through nutrition, lifestyle, and self-trust. This is not a coaching call. It is not a workshop. It is not a masterclass. It is a conversation, a place to pause, to reflect, to think differently about what it means to grow older well. Each week, I'll bring a topic that matters, sometimes scientific, sometimes personal, sometimes philosophical, but always grounded in evidence and lived experience. So wherever you are, if you can, take a breath, maybe pour yourself a beautiful cup of tea, and let's begin. All right, ladies, so I want to welcome you to Tea with Sophie, episode 1. So today we're beginning with something really beautifully simple, which is tea. So I don't know if you know this, but tea is the most common consumed beverage in the world after water. It just is. So across cultures, in China, obviously, in Japan, India, Morocco, England, yes, there's nothing that a cup of tea won't put right if you live in England. It's just like you've got a leg hanging off. Don't worry, you just need a cup of tea. We'll get you a cup of tea. Anything that's wrong, get you a cup of tea. I think it's called Builder's Brew, and a cuppa got those in Britain through wars, through difficulties, through pretty much everything. But for me now, tea is ceremony. Tea is a pause. Tea is a rhythm. Tea is shared presence, whether you're sharing it with somebody else or whether you are sharing it with just yourself, your own presence. So tea forces you to wait, which is so beautiful in this fast-paced economy that we're living in now, where everything is go, 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 go. And it's so fast-paced, and there's so much distraction all the time. So tea forces you to wait because you have to steep it. You can't rush it. So as you allow it to steep, right there is your beautiful pause. So for ladies who have worked with me in the Ignite method, you know the pause that we're talking about. And the pause is so important for everything. And now I think nowadays we forget to pause, because in the pause, we create space. And one of my favorite Viktor Frankl quotes is, in that pause, in that space lies our power. It's our ability to choose a different response. So in that pause and in that space, we then get to choose how we react. And so it's a beautiful, empowering pause that we take. So in a culture that rewards speed, tea is a small rebellion, isn't it? It's like, ah. So for women over 50, women who have spent decades responding, managing, solving, reacting, worrying, tea can become something more than a drink, something way more than a drink. It can become a boundary. It can become a nervous system reset, a daily act of self-respect. And this isn't trivial. This is important, because when you choose tea intentionally, you're choosing to sit instead of scroll, to breathe instead of brace. Not trivial. This is how we start to learn to regulate our nervous system. This is how we learn to meet our needs at a higher level, which is it's such an integral part of the work that I do, because we all have these needs. And particularly when we go into midlife and beyond, we have needs for, sometimes we feel lonely or angry or irritable or exhausted, or we're dealing with feelings that we have about ourselves that don't feel good. And so we tend to just quickly knee jerk and reach for the next dopamine hit, don't we? The thing that can just numb us and take those feelings away. It could be the comfort food. It could be the glass of wine. It could be scrolling. It could be Netflix or watching the news. Anything that numbs you. So when we're stressed, we tend to go into fight, blame, attack, flight, disappear, get the heck out of here, or freeze. So what I invite you to pay attention to is to just stay, to lean into that moment. And tea is a beautiful way to do that. So all true tea, let's talk actually about tea itself now. So I've been a huge tea drinker, and where somebody might be a wine connoisseur, I fancy myself as a little bit of a tea connoisseur. It's something I'm interested in, and I've learned a lot about over the years. So I want to just share with you the basics, because I think, like anything, the more you know about it, the more interesting it becomes. And then you sort of want to participate. You want to engage in it. It's like when you learn about art, it's like, oh, now I can actually enjoy going to a gallery because I know a little bit more about the artists. But it's the same with anything. So I'd like to take a moment just to tell you a little bit more if you don't know about tea itself. So all tea, and I'm talking about actual technical quote unquote tea, comes from the same plant. It comes from the same plant, the Camellia sinensis plant. One plant, all tea. So whether it's green, black, oolong, white, all comes from the same plant. But what determines the type of tea is where it's grown. So the soil, the climate, where it's harvested, how it's processed, and how much it is oxidized. So all of that determines whether it's going to be white, green, oolong, black, in that order, because white is the least oxidized tea, then green, a little bit, depending on how it's prepared. And of course, there are hundreds of different kinds of white tea. There are thousands of different kinds of green tea. There are hundreds of different kinds of oolong tea. It's such a deep kind of art and a science. But this oxidization is an important piece, because oxidization simply means the exposure to air after the leaves are harvested. And you know how things oxidize. Anything that's fresh oxidizes, which is why we want to have fresh foods, don't we? You cut an apple and it goes brown because it oxidizes. You cut an avocado, it goes black after a while because it oxidizes. We might have oils in our house. And one of the things that I talk so much to about my beautiful clients is the using ideally whole healthy fats, not even oils that have been refined, because the minute they're refined, the minute oil is extracted from the olive, it will start to oxidize, which is why oil, very high quality olive oil, comes in a dark bottle and should be kept in a cool, dark place. Vitamin C oxidizes, which is why when you're buying vitamin C serums for your face, you want to make sure they're really, really fresh, because oxidation is where it breaks down. And you've all heard the term antioxidants. And that's why I really advocate for a plant-rich diet, because we're getting all those flooding our system with antioxidants morning, noon, and night. So in terms of tea, the more oxidized a tea is, the darker and richer the flavor becomes. So generally, the more oxidized, the higher the caffeine content, right? So let me explain that. So white is not very dark in color, it's white. And then a black tea or a Pu-erh tea is very dark. It's a dark brown color. Isn't it a really good tea? Good black tea, which I like, should be really dark in color. That means it's heavily oxidized. And there are health benefits to white and green tea And there are also different health benefits to a darker, more oxidized tea. So in an ideal world, you're actually going to drink a little bit of all of them, probably wanting to favor green tea. And I'll get into that in a moment, why. And so the caffeine, interesting, isn't it, that the caffeine changes? So the caffeine on a white tea is going to be a little less, green tea, little less. And then as it gets darker and more oxidized, you're going to have way more caffeine in a black tea, such as an English breakfast tea or an Irish breakfast tea. So the main types are white tea, minimally processed, delicate, subtle; green tea, lightly oxidized, a sort of grassy, fresh taste if it's a really good quality tea. And it was all about quality. Oolong, partly oxidized, floral to toasty flavor. Black tea, fully oxidized, bold and robust. And then sometimes, flavors are added, such as bergamot, to make it into an Earl Grey. And then you've got Pu-erh, which is one of the most prized teas. It's fermented. It's very good for your gut health. It's very earthy and it's very complex. And it's one of the most prized teas because this is how tea, thousands of years ago was carried out on trade routes. And this fermented tea was packed into a cake. And some of these cakes of Pu-erh tea are now worth thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. It's almost like, think of it a little bit like a really fine wine, that is a vintage wine and it's year 1964 or something like that. That's going to be very expensive, but it is the same with these fermented Pu-erh teas. Very interesting. So let's talk about caffeine and L-theanine. So tea contains caffeine. Obviously, coffee contains caffeine. But tea also contains L-theanine, which is an amino acid which is unique to tea. Now, L-theanine crosses the blood-brain barrier and promotes alpha brainwave activity, a state associated with calm focus. And I think this is why I love drinking tea and I love drinking green tea. I'm drinking green tea right now because the it has a little caffeine, so it gives you that little lift, but the L-theanine that crosses the blood-brain barrier is deeply, deeply calming. So to me, it's the best of both worlds. And that's why tea feels very different from coffee. Now, there's nothing wrong with coffee, and there are enormous health benefits to coffee. But I think why tea has become a sort of beautiful ritual for so many cultures and so many people is because of the calming L-theanine. So coffee can feel sharp, spiky, jittery. And it does for me now. I used to drink coffee, but not so much now. Tea feels smoother, more sustained, sort of sustained energy and calm alertness rather than agitation. So for many women over 50 who feel wired and tired, or who suddenly feel that like they can't tolerate coffee, and sometimes as you get older, it can be very acidic in your tummy too, and that's not you can get a bit of almost like gastritis from it, inflamed stomach lining. So some women can't drink coffee anymore. So tea can be a beautiful alternative, and it supports focus without overwhelming the nervous system. So everything that I do is about nervous system regulation. Okay, next, green tea versus black tea. Okay, now green tea, this is so important for women over 50. So green tea is very rich in catechins, and especially EGCG. Now, these are very important compounds, and they have been studied for antioxidant capacity, metabolic support, cardiovascular health, and support for insulin sensitivity. And this is why on my list of top 10 foods and beverages for natural holistic weight release, but more important for disease prevention, and especially for breast cancer prevention, actually all cancer prevention, but especially breast cancer prevention, on my list of top 10, green tea is right up there. Now, black tea contains different polyphenols. These are polyphenols that we're talking about. Theoflavins and theorubigins, which have strong research around cardiovascular health, gut microbiome support, and blood pressure support. So it's slightly different, which is why it's a beautiful idea to have both. It's not that one is better than the other. They simply have different polyphenol profiles. And so those of you who have done, and ladies who work with me in the Ignite program know that we have a really big focus on polyphenols in food. And so we're eating a big, wide, diverse variety of food so that we get in all these different polyphenols. Okay. Now, Pu-erh tea deserves a special mention because it's fermented, it's earthy, and there is a lot of emerging science about lipid metabolism and cholesterol support, which we all need to really dial that in, particularly after the age of 50. It is, I will warn you, if you haven't tried it, it's an acquired taste. When I first tasted it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird. I really don't like this, but I really like it now. And you can drink teas with, typically you would drink black tea, maybe with a little bit of milk. I advocate for a plant-based milk. And you wouldn't really want to put milk in any of the other teas. The only one that I would recommend is a sort of robust black tea, pairs very well with a plant-based milk. I would advocate for a soy milk because you're adding some protein in there, but any plant-based milk. All right, so let's move on. Not all tea is technically tea, all right? So unless it comes from the bush, the Camellia sinensis bush, it's not technically a tea. So we tend to think of, you know, chamomile tea or peppermint tea, but technically that would be a herbal infusion. And that's the delineation. So you can have an infusion or a tea. Now, examples of infusions would be hibiscus, would be Rooibos, red bush tea, and also there's a green Rooibos tea that's very high in antioxidants, highly recommend. Chamomile and peppermint. And there are lots of others. There's lemon balm, there's lemon verbena. I love to, whenever I go to a sort of herbalist store, I love looking at all these beautiful infusions because there are so many of them that have medicinal properties. So it's a huge world to explore. Rooibos, which comes from South Africa, is naturally caffeine-free, rich in antioxidants. And green Rooibos, which is less oxidized, appears to have even higher antioxidant capacity. And Rooibos and all of these infusions are caffeine-free as well. They're wonderful options for evening rituals or for women who are sensitive to caffeine. And then there are certain teas such as chamomile has epigenin, which can be very useful to help you to sleep. Peppermint can be absolutely wonderful for digestion, digestive issues. And they all have different benefits. And Rooibos is a really sort of soothing tea. And Rooibos, red bush tea, traditionally, I actually love to drink with a little bit of milk, a little bit of plant-based milk. So decaffeinated tea. So yes, you can drink decaffeinated. This is a question that I get asked a lot, green or black tea. The best methods are water processed, CO2 processed teas. So you do want to check how the method that has been used to decaffeinate it. Some polyphenols may be lost in the process, so it's not ideal, slightly reduced during decaffeination, but meaningful benefits do remain, and the taste can still remain. So if caffeine disrupts your sleep, decaf is the way to go. Good sleep will always outweigh a marginal difference in antioxidant content. And so you can definitely look for those ones. Just a little note on quality of tea. You always want to look, ideally go for a loose leaf tea. So you can obviously buy any tea, probably with the exception of Pu-erh tea, in a tea bag. Typically, not always, tea bags are the lowest quality. And sometimes in the trade, it's known as tea dust, which is all the sort of dust that's on the floor from the really fine whole leaves are sort of scooped up and put into tea bags. And also, just on a side note, we want to be careful because some tea bags that are made out of a certain material, like a kind of mesh material, can have microplastics in them. So you want to be careful that it's an unbleached, paper compostable tea bag. But typically, loose leaf teas are way, way higher quality in a tea. So I highly recommend you get loose leaf teas, and you can use a tea pot, a little tea strainer. Now I buy these little unbleached tea bags that I'll put my own tea in and make a little tea bag. But quality is everything. And I promise you, if you've ever tried a green tea, and you're like, oh, that is so boring, it tastes like dishwater. And way, way back in the day, I'd be like, oh, it tastes like nothing. It's just because it's not good quality. The other thing that's really important is how you brew your tea. So, and I could do an hour on this, but brewing tea is very important. And suffice to say that always follow, when you purchase a really high quality tea, it should have very specific brewing instructions on the packet or the tin. And really good tea should be stored in a tin, a little canister or a tin, away from bright light. And so you'll know that it's a really high quality tea if it says on the back of the can the amount of tea to put in, a tablespoon or a teaspoon, and the temperature of the water. And so it'll say it needs to be boiling 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 185 degrees or 170. This is critical because typically a very fine, delicate green tea needs a much lower brewing temperature. For example, the tea that I'm drinking, which is a fine green tea, is about 185 degrees centigrade. If it had been hotter, it would have ruined the tea. The taste, the flavor, everything would have turned it bitter. And typically very delicate teas like white and green need just 1 minute or 2 minutes hot brewing time. So lower temperature, way less, sometimes just a minute brewing time, and it is utter perfection. It's this light, sweet, green, grassy taste. And if you overbrew it or if it's too hot, you won't have that taste. And then typically an oolong will be a little bit hotter, maybe 185, 90, maybe 95 degrees. And black tea is always boiling. It's a good old cup of black tea. You want a kettle on the boil. And typically you'll steep for about 4 minutes if it's a black tea. And again, oolong tea, less. So I'll just quickly go over that one more time. So white and green will be lower temperature, less brewing time. Then we go to oolong, slightly warmer temperature, slightly longer brewing time. And then we go to black or Pu-erh, and we're talking boiling, rolling boil, and steeping for about 4 minutes. Okay, so that's how it goes. So when you're shopping for tea, just do check, because a fine tea purveyor or supplier will take this very seriously, and it will be written on the instructions. Okay, and there are some tea bags and that some brands that are really quite decent, but you have to sort of really shop around and find ones that work. Matcha tea. So matcha is a tea that I love. I'm just going to take a sip of my tea. Matcha tea is a green tea, and a very high quality green tea will be most of my matcha. It's from originates from Japan, and it's the whole green tea leaf that is ground up into a fine powder. Now, it's become very, very popular, certainly, I think, across the world now, but in the United States, and when I travel to Europe, there's almost nowhere that you can't get a matcha latte now. And it's unfortunate because in some ways the quality has really, really gone down, and there's a lot of very cheap, bad quality matcha. And obviously you're going to find that in your sort of big chain coffee shops. So if you're going to drink matcha, purchase a really high quality matcha, ceremonial grade or something like that. And you might think, well, that's very expensive, but cost per cup, when you go to the coffee shop, it's going to be $7 or $8 per cup. Low quality, they're often using a plant-based milk that has sugar or syrup in it or something like that. The whole thing is low quality. So buy a beautiful quality one and make it at home. And it becomes a ritual. Matcha is a ritual. It's supposed to be a ritual where you have a little matcha bowl and a matcha whisk. And all of this is just soothing. It's a ritual. You whisk it up into a little, so it creates a little foam on the top, and you either drink it just like that, or you could make a little latte, add a little steamed plant-based milk. But it has higher levels of catechins, which is this anti-cancer compound. Really important. Please, ladies, drink your matcha, high quality matcha. It has a little higher level of caffeine in it, and it has also higher theanine. So it just works for you every single way. So love my matcha. It produces a focused, sustained energy. And just on sourcing, it's not just the country of origin, and this goes for all teas. You know, there are excellent teas from both China and Japan, and heavy metal concerns depends on sourcing, testing practices, and exactly where in that country the tea is grown. So due diligence, really finding out about third-party testing, etc. So, ladies, I'm just trying to think if there's anything more that I want to, any closing comments that I want to make about tea. All this to say is that tea, there's no wonder to me why it is the most commonly enjoyed beverage after water, if you enjoy drinking water in the world. And I just want to bring it back to tea being a ritual. So it's about choosing ritual over reaction, choosing presence over speed, choosing to steep. Even if it's 1 minute, that's 1 minute steeping, 1 minute where you could just put down your phone and take a breath, 2 or 3 deep belly breaths, and just remind yourself to bring yourself back into the moment of presence. As I always say, this moment that will never happen again, this moment that is absolutely unrepeatable, this exquisite moment that you will never have again. So the deeper question is not just which tea should I drink? It's, am I living in a way that allows me to pause? I'll repeat that more time. Am I living in a way that allows me to pause? So if all you do this week is choose 1 cup of tea and sit with it without your phone, that is enough. Without your phone. So that's it for today. I'll see you next Monday for another conversation about aging powerfully. This is Tea with Sophie.